Welcome to the TomorrowZone Catalyst Podcast, where we explore bold ideas shaping the future of business and technology. I'm your host, Deb Reuben, and today I am thrilled to have Jeanette Dorazio with us today. She is a dynamic global C-suite executive who is known for leading high-growth tech companies through transformation. As the former CEO of Lead Pages, she empowered digital entrepreneurs through no-code website technology, and her leadership in SaaS, e-commerce, and digital strategy has driven innovation across multiple industries. She's the perfect guest to help us explore agentic AI that acts with autonomy, along with the challenges of AI adoption and some of the ethical considerations that leaders need to be thinking about. Jeanette, welcome to the show.
Hi, Deb. Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to geeking out with you a little bit about AI. But before we dive into that, I was wondering if you could just in a nutshell explain to us what it is that you do these days, and then we can dive into the AI stuff.
Oh, well, great. Yeah. So what I'm doing these days, so I just recently came off a role with an AI startup. So help them get started and get some foundational processes in place as they continue through their early stages of growth. But so for me right now, I am consulting with really small to mid-sized companies that have questions about AI, specifically, how do we implement? What do we do? I think all the questions we're going to get into here is the ones I'm getting. So just little small snackable bites right now, possibly going to be working with maybe another startup with another option. We'll see where that comes out. But
awesome. I'm sure the possibilities are endless for you, given your background. Well, I'm really excited to dive in and geek out with you a little bit. AI comes up every single day in the work that we do. And so I'm really looking forward to your take on it. So first, I wanted to dive into AI hype versus reality. I know you've led teams through digital transformation in a variety of industries. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about AI adoption that you have encountered in your work?
Great question. The biggest one by far is people are afraid it's going to replace my job, right? That's the big one that I hear constantly. When I was leading, when I was running Lead Pages and leading that group, and we were doing some projects with OpenAI, and so that was 2-3 years ago. So ChatGPT was just released to the masses. A lot of freak out. My graphic designers there, we had a conversation one day about, hey, wow, this technology is going to go to a place where, eventually it's doing text right now, but it could do video, it could go do graphics. And my graphic designer freaked out, right? And I saw the freeze. And she was honest. She says, you know what? That really scares me because I've built my career doing this and it could go away. So we had a good discussion about, what are the things you do in a graphic design role that's mundane that, maybe this could take care of, right? And so as soon as we got past the fear it's going to take my job, and she started talking to me about, oh gosh, yeah, there's all these, mundane tasks I have to do when I'm building a design that, she started to think maybe AI could do that for me. And just think about, what that opens up for you, right? So these time competitive tasks that everybody hates to do, if you eliminate those, how much more meaningful could you focus on the work or the design you're doing? Or, hey, now you're freed up to have strategic discussions with other members of other teams. So, by far, it hasn't changed so much in the same type of misconception, same fear. I think it's amplified now that more people see it. But on the other hand, people are starting to understand what it can do. So, but yeah, by far, I think every day I have a discussion about, what job, how's it going to replace me? is my role going to be here anymore? And we've all heard about upskilling, right? I think we've been hearing about it for the last 5 years or so, right? Upskill, upskill, upskill. And what does that mean, right? And so we're here where it's, upskill versus, I don't know, I'm kind of getting tired of that word versus more of, how can you use the technology to benefit you positively in your day-to-day job? So, yeah, those are a lot of the conversations that I have these days. That's the number one. It's not how hard will it be. Is it going to be difficult? On the backside of that, though, right, is fear of taking my job. But then it's the change management piece, right? So, yes, it's not just the technology reporting in, but the change management required for people to adopt it. So, I see those kind of hand in hand, and that's usually the two-punch discussion I get into.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing as well. And there definitely is a difference between AI taking my job. Jobs are typically made up of a variety of tasks, some requiring human ingenuity and strategy and insight, and some that definitely could be offloaded to automation. So I think that, the big change is, how do we think about how we collaborate with these tools? So I wanted to get into the topic of agentic AI, because this is all a buzz right now, but I think it's more than just a buzzword. So we know that AI is evolving very quickly, and it's evolving beyond just automating those mundane tasks into more autonomous decision making. So in a nutshell, could you just explain for us and for our listeners who might not be acquainted with this, what is agentic AI? And how is it different from the common tools that we might be acquainted with already, like ChatGPT or Claude or others?
Great question. Yeah, it is quite the buzzword these days, isn't it? Agentic AI.
I'm hearing people say the future is agentic AI.
Well, and I just read an article by TechCrunch over the weekend that agentic AI and assistant. So these two words are starting to combine a little bit, but I'll explain at least my definition of it and explain it to people. So think of agentic AI as your assistant, right? So the assistant doesn't wait for instructions, right? So it can figure out, meaning the model, can figure out the next steps required to reach a goal, right? So it's got a little bit of its own decision-making process involved with it. You'll hear people talk about the chain of thought, COT. So the agent, the assistant, is going to work independently to complete tasks without supervision. Now they need guidance, and you need to look at the output, but it's going to use other tools, other apps on its own to figure out and reason and to do that task. And the cool thing too is it's going to adjust when things don't go as expected. So it's going to change. So think of it again, if you put it in the guise of it's my assistant. So let me give a good example. So I have an executive admin, and I've asked her to book my travel to an upcoming conference. In that travel booking, I need the airfare, I need the hotel, I need transportation. If it's an industry event, right, maybe I need to register. So there's all these, I just outlined 4 tasks. With an agent or an assistant, that assistant will do those tasks for me, and I don't have to interact with it. So for example, you could set up an agent to where it looks at my calendar. Google is experimenting with some of this too. They have their agents out there, but it will look at my calendar and see I have a travel booked or an industry event coming up. And it'll go ahead and know my preferences and go ahead and book that travel for me. So not interacting with an assistant like I have in the past. So much as an executive admin gets to know my travel preferences and will know right away, hey, I know Jeanette likes to fly Delta. I know she's a Hilton's Honors member. I know that I have her credit card on file, so we can book the registration. She usually prefers Uber to Lyft, right? The agent will go do all that for me, have it on my calendar, contact delta.com, right? Book in my reservation, get my seating on there. It'll also book in the Hilton, right? So it's going to the web, it's looking at all my accounts and passwords, it's doing that for me. So then I just say, oh, okay, my trip's coming up and here it is. So it's a really kind of a simple use case for what an agent will do. Contrast that with ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, any of those tools. With the differences with those is that you're asking it to do a specific task, right? And it's going to answer the question. So you hear people talk about it's a prompt. So you're going to tell it to do something, right? An easy example is write me an email response to this request I got at work, right? So it'll put together a very simple response. You could interact with it and say, no, I need it more in a professional tone, rewrite in a professional tone, but it's very specific, right? I ask, it responds. I ask, it responds, versus an agent is doing things without having to be told, but you're reviewing what they're doing at the end. So 2 examples of how that works.
I think that's a good way to distinguish between just typical generative AI app and the agent.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I was thinking about in your email example, one of my favorite prompts these days is, I tell it, write whatever.
Yep.
And then my next prompt is make it less cringy.
Yes. 100%. It does a pretty good job.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Like that simple prompt, like improves everything. And then we have less times where it's using the word delve. Anyway, so how do you see agentic AI shaping the future of business? I understand like the value of the use case that you share, but if we kind of think out into the future, what do you see happening there?
And that's a great question. What I see is that, and I've seen a shift probably in the last, I would say about 3 or 4 months, in how businesses and leaders are thinking about these agents, right? So what I'm seeing a shift from, instead of being very, what I call sniper-like, very specific on, hey, use ChatGPT to help you with, writing an email response or brainstorming with you. Bringing these agents in is going to be a shift from thinking about AI as a tool to viewing it more as a collaborator, right? Or a partner in the business operations. So that's going to be a fundamental change, right? Agents, I see them also specialized performing in specialized function with minimal supervision. I know Salesforce with their Einstein agents are coming out and really focusing on that sales process. And that's a great use case where, anybody that's in sales and knows the process, whether let's take a typical B2B sales process, right? From qualifying leads generation, contacting them, qualifying those leads, right? Putting them through a sales process all the way to contracting. Lots of steps in there. Some of them are very manual. And so you have a company like Salesforce that's kind of built agents for each of those processes. They have sales development reps, right? SDRs that are, agents going out there and calling for leads. All the way through that to where an agent can start the contracting process, right? And what that changes. So instead of the salesperson having to be involved in every single step, or many salespeople involved in that step, you can automate most of that with an agent. So what's happening now is you're allowing your salesperson to spend more quality time with the customer, understanding what their needs are, really building that relationship versus so focused on the process and, oh my God, I got to update my CRM. I got to put, what stage of the sales process am I in? Contract review, right? All that gets taken out of the chain. So, thinking about that operationally, what are these things you can do in your businesses these agents can help you do. You also see things too. I mean, there's lots of startup companies out there that are building agents for accounts payable, for example, right? There's a lot of discussion going about, accounts payable specialist who actually processes invoices, right? Pays these. Can an agent do that for us, right? Less cost, more accurate, not tired, right? And can we be more efficient there? And then now we move that accounts payable specialist into a different type of role, whether it's reviewing these or taking a more strategic look at things. So that's at least today, right? As you said, it moves so fast. At least that's how I'm seeing, leaders kind of think about these agents in their businesses.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting balance between what's possible with tech and how do we lead change with humans. And I think about the sales process that you were describing. And, one of the things that I hear a lot from salespeople, business development people, when we talk about bringing AI into the picture or even just automation is like, oh, this is the relationship business and you can't apply automation because it's all about the human touch. But what we are finding and what you were describing in your examples with AI is that AI actually can elevate the human touch in these processes. And we're starting to see the value of AI to offload some of the elements of the sales process so that we can focus more on the human touch and the relationship building, but not letting things fall through the cracks, because a lot of these sales processes have a lot of moving parts. And I haven't met a human yet who loves entering data into a CRM.
Nope.
So it's like, I think, as we think about where do we find use cases and how do we drive adoption of AI, those are all things to keep in mind. I'm curious, what strategies have you found effective in helping to get teams on board with embracing AI?
So many examples there. I think the best ones that I personally did coming off of my last role, which was the product they had was a conversational AI product for sales enablement teams or sales enablement. So think about practicing role plays, right? Salespeople, and I've built sales enablement teams, and it's always, when you have a class coming into training, and that's, the one section on the syllabus, if you will, is role play, right? Everybody dreads it. They hate it. Nobody makes time for it, but it's perhaps one of the most important things to do. So it was cool. This product helped people gain confidence, and you're talking to a persona that you've built. So as cool as the software was, the customers they had were varied, right? All the way from manufacturing to technology and finance and everywhere in between. And the adoption rate in some of those more traditional industries, for example, there was a company that was a reseller of John Deere equipment, right? So very hands-on sales process. I work my territory. I'm driving 500 miles a week talking to these customers, and the thought of putting AI in there, they just froze up. And it was pretty much like how I said at the beginning, right? Is this going to take my job as a salesperson? So what I help them do to get over that is you just start out with a little test case, a little chunk, a little pilot, right? And you get a group of people together that's a mix of those who love technology, right? The early adopters are the ones that have the brand new iPhones. They're probably on the beta test for OpenAI, right? And they're using all the tools. They love it. But I had them do a mix of early adopters and those that were very against the technology or very skeptical of it. And so building a team where you have those two bookends and people kind of in the middle what you get is you get a good conversation, a good kind of a peer interaction that goes on, hey, I did this and this technology here, and this is the result. It was very cool. And alternatively, you get the person that says, yeah, well, I tried it and, the persona wasn't right or the voice wasn't right. So doing this allowed people to see the possibilities. So instead of this top down, hey, you will use this tech and you'll figure this out, more of a bottoms up. So for me and all the business transformations I've done with this technology, for me, the most successful has been bottoms up. So you bring these small pilot teams together. You're transparent. That's the big thing too, is you need to be transparent about the technology. What is it doing? What is the data it's pulling from? A lot of people get concerned about privacy, right? So it's working with your technology teams to ensure that the models aren't, what are we doing with that private data? Right? Making sure it's scrubbed and following your policies and your ethics around it. The other thing that's cool with when you get a group like this together to do a pilot is they look for the biases, right? Because we see it, they would never say X, Y, Z, right? So they help identify that. So you've got a really good group of people put together to work on these. The result is you have what I found 9 times out of 10 is the ones that were skeptical, the naysayers. They actually ended up being the biggest advocates and fans of the technology. And they serve as ambassadors to the rest of the employee base, right?
What a great transformation.
Yeah.
Turn those skeptics into champions for the tech.
100%.
So I want to ask you one more question before we go to our final, we're TomorrowZone. We like to look at what's ahead, where are things going. So looking ahead, what are some of the AI trends that business leaders should be paying attention to most?
And it's evolving so fast. I think there's
dizzying fast.
It's dizzying fast, which is hard for leaders, right? Because where's it going? What's happening? I think, being a leader, being the chair, is just paying attention and expecting AI to become more autonomous. So as we talk about these agents, what does that mean, right? Identifying those multi-step tasks, those operational processes that you can maximize using some AI technologies, right? And I think back to how I started your initial question, right? What's the biggest challenge everybody faces, right? So it is that, will it replace my job? Will it replace my role? So as a leader and you're looking out to the future, it's anticipating that, right? Playing with the technology, using the technology. I have been interacting through a group I'm involved with several C-suite leaders, and I know they're busy, right? They've got their day jobs, but I was surprised to hear how many of them haven't really used the technology. And I think it's fundamental, right? As a leader, if you don't use it, how can you predict what it's going to do? So not being afraid to experiment, asking a lot of questions, and really looking at these agents and thinking, what can we do within my organization, within my team to implement this successfully, right? And seeing what the possibilities are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, just when I think I've got a handle on, okay, I see this strategy, something else changes. So I think that's, for me, personally, that's the most exciting part about AI is just, yes, it's sometimes hard to keep up with how fast it's evolving, but when you're seeing what I thought of 2 years ago wasn't possible is now possible, is amazing. So it's keeping your head up, right? Looking around, asking questions, working with the tech, thinking about how my workforce is going to change. I'll give a good example. A few years ago, Lead Pages, when we were a Google Cloud shop and when they were releasing their new tools, and I saw how these tools could do coding, right? Even I, who've been in tech for 25 years, and early on was product management. I can create a mean SQL statement, but I wasn't going to code in Python necessarily. So seeing how these tools have evolved to where I could even code in Python, for me as a leader, even 2.5, 3 years ago, it was, engineering is going to change. What does that mean? How do I need to get ahead of this? How do we need to change our workforce in order to use these tools correctly? So that's the biggest thing I see on the horizon, at least in the next 9 to 12 months, is as these agents are coming out, as some of the big tech, Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera, just be aware that these agents are going to get better. And what does that mean?
Yeah. Sometimes people say like the AI you're using today is the worst one.
Exactly.
It's the worst it will be. It is continually changing, and that's so exciting. So before we wrap up, I just want to ask you our signature question, Jeanette. What is one thing that leaders can do today to shape a more awesome future with AI?
Well, the one thing leaders can do is start with the people closest to the work so they feel confident experimenting and contributing new ideas. So I mentioned earlier, right, when you're looking at implementing these new technologies, bottom up is best. Involve people. And provide those learning resources, like hands-on workshops, open discussion forums, right? So that transparency reduces that fear. You're always going to have change management, right? I don't care if you're, turning on Copilot in Microsoft or, Slack, for example. I remember when Slack came onto the scene, right? Any technology is always going to have a change management element to it, but I think it's important with this one to be as transparent as possible. Bring in people to teach them how to do something. Create an internal group where you talk about, what's the best prompt of the day, right? What have you used to be successful? So encourage that collaboration. And what this will allow you to do is the team member, the employees are going to gain a really clear understanding of its potential. There's also ethical considerations too, right? Having those discussions and what it's doing, and having people bring success stories, right? Share those success stories, right?
Celebrate wins.
Exactly. And you're gonna have a great AI transformation in a business, right?
Awesome.
The more you keep it secretive, the more it's just the IT team that's doing that. The harder it's going to be to embrace where the world's going.
I love that. That is so important to help people to embrace it by involving them early, but then being very transparent in what's going on. Jeanette, I just want to really thank you for sharing your insights and your experience with us.
Thank you, Deborah. It was amazing. I love the opportunity to talk about AI and getting to, as we say, nerd out about it with you. So thanks for having me.
So fun. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, join the conversation on LinkedIn, share it with a colleague who might need some help understanding where things are going with AI. Until next time, I just want to encourage you to stay curious and choose to make awesome happen.